Okay, I'm back, beloved clients and friends, in part 2 of this series. And I want to give you an example of what it looks like investing the way I just talked about in the previous video. So, for many years, I taught a class on investing at a local community college. And I had a student come up to me after class one day, and she said, "Hey, would you mind taking a look at my investment account and give me some advice on it?" I go, "Sure." She pulled out her statement and her brokerage statement, and she had about 2.5 million in it. And I said, "Yeah, why don't we get together and give me a chance to look this over, and I'll make some recommendations." So we got together at her house, and she told me the story of where this came from. And it was an inheritance from her mom. Her mom had recently passed away, and she had they'd split up her assets. Among those assets was this brokerage account. So she got a third of it, and her brother and sister also got a third. So the mom had an investment portfolio of about $7.5 million. And so this lady I was talking to, she goes, "Yeah, this portfolio is spinning off about $75,000 a year in income. So I'm just gonna, my plan is to really not touch it, and just, but I will take that $75,000 income to supplement my income and pass it on to my 2 kids after I die." That was her plan. She's like, "What do you think of that?" And so if you think about it, the mom had $7.5 million portfolio. It was generating, the girl's third was generating $75,000. So the mom was getting $225,000 a year in dividends off of this portfolio. And as she told me the story, her dad had passed away 8 years before the mom, and he was the guy that was the investor. He was interested in investing, and he had built up this portfolio over his lifetime. When the mom inherited it, she didn't know anything about investing. That wasn't her thing. It wasn't her interest. So she really didn't open the statements for 8 years. All she did was collect the dividends. And the portfolio was just fine for 8 years with nobody even looking at it. And when I looked at the portfolio, what the dad had built was a portfolio of about 30 companies. And I looked at them right away, and I recognized what I was looking at. There was just these great blue chip companies, like the ones I had talked about in the previous video, that will grow and preserve your wealth over time. The dad had not been my student, but I imagine he had read some of the same books I had read, or had a similar philosophy to me, and you could tell just by his portfolio. And when I sat down with the girl, I said, "Well, you probably really don't need to do much. Of the 30 companies, I think I recommended a change of 2 of them, and just keep doing what you're doing." She goes, "Okay." And 2 years later, she called me again. We sat down, we looked at the portfolio. She had not done anything to it. I had not looked at it for 2 years. And I looked at it and said, "Well, maybe change this one. And we'll talk again in 2 years." And so there's an example of a great portfolio that was able to grow and preserve wealth over time. And by the way, the dad that had built this portfolio, his background, he had worked for the FBI. He worked for the government, so he had a government job. He was pretty high up there, so he had a decent paying government job. But he wasn't rich, he wasn't, the owner of the Washington Senators, or, he wasn't the CEO of some big company. He had a decent paying government job, and he was able to, from that income, put some aside over the course of his working years and build this portfolio. And over time, it just compounded. And just looking at it without knowing the hard facts, I imagine that when he died, it was probably closer to 4 million. And by the time the mom died, it had gotten to 7.5 million. And it was the type of portfolio that would, even collecting the dividends, would probably double every 10 years. So if the lady I was talking to let's say she lived another 20 years and then passed it on to her kids, my guess would be that $2.5 million portfolio would, in addition to paying those dividends, double twice and go from 2.5 to 5 to 10, and then the kids would each get $5 million, and the dividends would do the same thing, because like I said, Starbucks, they raise their dividends by 10% every year. So, and most of these companies, they raise their dividend every year by more than the rate of inflation. So, and the value of that portfolio is keeping up with inflation, and their income is more than keeping up with inflation, and they really don't. I mean, no one had looked at that portfolio for 8 years. I looked at it once, then looked at it again 2 years later, and probably look at it again in 2 years. And that's an example of what we're trying to build, these great companies that will grow and preserve your wealth over time, and you don't really have to make too many changes, and you don't really have to worry about, who's in the White House, or what are interest rates doing, or what's inflation, or how's this war going to turn out, because there have been other wars, there have been other presidents, there have been other interest rate regimes, there have been other Fed governors, and this thing's done fine, and these companies have as well. So that's an example of what you can expect if you build a portfolio like that. And you really don't have to look at it every day, because you know that you're not going to be shocked to drive, hey, where did the Home Depot go? Wasn't it just here yesterday? It's going to be there when I drive by tomorrow, more than likely. And so will the Starbucks, and so will McDonald's, and so will Apple and Amazon, and the type of companies that we buy. So anyways, I hope that example gives you a picture of what we're trying to build and what it looks like when you have it, and that you don't really have to worry about the day-to-day ups and downs, because sure, over that time is the price going up and down, and in the next we will talk about what causes the price to move so much. Okay, so have a great day.